4 locations at the same time. And there we are. We are live. Welcome to our broadcast today with Mr. Brian Proctor. And we're going to be talking about the new wonderful book that he has out called My Father Knew the Secret, Growing Up with Bob Proctor. Brian, thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you, Anders. I'm really glad to be here with you.
This is a big honor for myself and our entire community. You know, your father and you have single-handedly helped us change over 10,000 lives now at our live events, at our in our programs, at our live events, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience being able to do this with you. So
that's great. Well, it's good to be here. I have to say before we even get going, my father loved you, Anders, and we had so much fun when you came out to our events in California. Dad would get you up on the stage and have you teach a couple of sessions. And it was always so well received and such a unique way of presenting. He loved it. And he really enjoyed the relationship that he had with you.
Well, thank you. That really means a lot. And it was so mutual. It is so mutual because, he's obviously still here, but in a different energetic state.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a wonderful journey. And like I said before we started, it's hard to believe that it's only been that short amount of time. So, Brian, today we're going to be talking about all the great wisdom that came along with being Bob's son and working closely with him for over 30 years. All of this came about, the fact that we're sitting here now came about through one recommendation you really made to your father back in 2016. And me, like you said, speaking on paradigm shift at your event and so on and so forth. But one thing I really would love to hear from you here as we get started is, people often say, I wish I could have met him. We've heard that often in our community. And I will say to you who are listening, who are watching this right now, Brian's new book is by far the best shot at getting into Bob's energy and knowing him as it stands today. So, what would you say to a person who often brings that up? I wish I could have met Bob. I wish, I could have just spoken one word to him. You must get that a lot as well, Brian.
I do, Anders. It's funny. I started writing the book almost 4 years ago when Dad was alive, when he was here. Yeah. And he knew I was writing it, and he really liked the idea of it. I wasn't sure what I was going to call the book at that time, but he knew I was writing about all the lessons I had learned growing up as his son, right from early childhood up until 60 years old. And, when Dad passed away, it was, to say it was astounding would be probably an understatement. The messages that we got as a family from people was just, it was heartwarming. It was incredible. Yeah. And there were so many people that left a message that they've been studying Bob, or they've watched him on YouTube. They've seen all his information. They really wish that they had had the chance to see him live and to meet him in person. Yeah. And it's so interesting that now coming out with this book, it's just, I feel that what I've done here is, I say this book is really not about me. It's about my father. And I think that's why I'm so happy about promoting it. And for anybody that didn't get to meet him, this book, I'll show you, I've got a copy of it here. It's called My Father. Oh, look at you.
Right there. We'll hold it so the camera can see it.
So in that book is really, it allows you to meet my father and to know my father in a way that you could have only done if you were in front of him. My wife said when I started writing this, she said, Brian, you're the only one who can really write this book. You grew up with him. Yeah. I was around my father right from day one when he got started in this business, when it was a tough business to get started in. And I share all the stories of intimate moments that I had with Dad, and the things that he taught me as I was growing up and right up until just before he passed. just such valuable lessons that I've been able to apply in my life,
Yeah.
that I know that anybody watching it, they get this book and read it, you'll be able to apply it in your life and live just such a live in such a great place, live from such a great space. And I feel anyway, I think I've nailed the stories in such a way that you can actually learn from the stories,
Yeah.
and then more importantly, take action so
Yeah.
that you can actually change your life and go in the direction that you want to go.
That is so good. And that's what I love about it. It's not just, it's a bio meets personal transformation, because there's some tangible tools you can apply. There's reflection exercises. It's very, very transformational. Now, the process you mentioned started in 2019. What was the moment or thought that made you decide to actually do this?
Well, the moment of thought was a conversation I had with my wife, Corey. Um, I had been thinking that, I need to write a book. And I said to her, I said, I've got so many things that I've learned, obviously with Bob Proctor as a father, that I really felt I could put something into a book that could go out to the masses, that people can afford without spending thousands and thousands of dollars, that it can really get out there in a big way. And the first thing Corey said to me, she says, well, why don't you write about what it was like having Bob Proctor as a father?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, that makes sense. I mean, at every seminar I'm at, like every time, I can tell you thousands upon thousands of times, I get asked, what's it like having Bob Proctor as a father? And so this book really answers that question. There's not a simple answer to that. But I think with everything that I've instilled into that book, I think really answers what it's like having Bob Proctor as a father. I feel it's, once you get through that, it's pretty clear what it was like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the stories, the personal, really heartfelt stories that you put into it. And anyone that's been in your father's presence will testify to that sort of magical aura that he had around him.
Mhm.
And that just an ability to make anyone feel like they're the most important person in the world. What do you think contributed to that?
Well, I don't know where he learned that, but he calls that an impression of increase,
Mm.
and it's really the whole meaning of an impression of increase is that you leave everybody you come in contact with feeling better that they came in contact with you that day.
Yeah.
If you can live your life from that place, boy, you're going to live a magical life, and people are going to want to deal with you, want to do business with you, and you will attract so much more into your life because people want to be with you and deal with you.
Yeah.
Dad taught me that lesson when I was really young. I was like 9 years old. I can remember specifically where I was, and I started using that when I was going into a new school. I was kind of nervous about starting school over again, being that new kid, and
Mhm.
and he taught me that, and he said it's really easy to do. All you need to do is put these four letters across your head, MMFI, and they stand for make me feel important. And if you can make everybody that is standing in front of you or that you're interacting with feel important, make them feel seen,
Yeah.
whether it's just as simple as a sincere compliment,
Yeah.
or just by taking interest in them. If you can do that, you are going to get on with it in this world in such a great way. And I know for me, that was one of the greatest lessons I learned from Dad. And I've taught that to my kids. My kids leave everybody they come in contact with the impression of increase. And people just want to be around you when you're like that. I mean, you have that. You're always complimenting people. You're always, saying good things whenever I've seen you with anybody. And it's a gift. Not everybody does that. How often we get into a room with a group of people and you meet that one person that just stands in front of you and spills all of their stuff on you the whole time and never ask you one question.
Right.
It's, you kind of want to get away. Whereas you can stand there and ask them meaningful questions and take an interest in them.
Yeah.
Boy, it just changes everything. And that was a really valuable lesson that I learned from Dad. Where he got it from exactly, I'm not sure, but he's lived that his entire life.
That's one of the things that really made me so appreciative of your father. Like, he had that energy of just really taking a deep, profound interest when you wouldn't think he had the time, or even the energy, at a live event, there's so much going on, and he's zoned in, and that made me feel important. The whole chapter that you put in the book about that is just so mind-blowingly good as well. And yet it's a simple lesson, but it's not as easy to apply, right? That's the key. I love the part you wrote about, decision as well, about when you're nervous, when you're getting on stage or having to speak or deliver. We have a lot of followers, a lot of clients that are also delivering valuable messages to the world. But the story about your father giving you that advice of focusing on the receiver and not yourself, that is such a, it's a mind-boggling thing as well, because we do have our energy going inward, don't we?
We do. It's like I can remember that conversation. Anders, I think I was never big on being on stage, or quite frankly, doing interviews like this. It was just not my thing. I kind of like to, hide in the background. And especially towards the end of my father's life, the last few years, he didn't have the energy that he always had before. So, he asked if I'd go up and do certain segments at some of the events. And it made me so nervous, it's not even funny. Like, I did not want to get up on the stage. And I can remember sitting with him, and I talk about this in the book. I remember sitting with him in a hotel room in California, early in the morning. We used to get together at 5 a.m. If we weren't together in the same city, we'd probably talk to each other just about every day at 5 a.m. But I'd grab a couple of coffees and I'd go to his room, and we just sit there and just chill for an hour or so before we had to get ready for the day. And I remember talking to him and saying, Dad, I'm nervous about getting up on stage again. And he switched my attitude on that so quickly. He just looked at me. He says, Brian, he says, you're nervous because you're focused on you and what the audience is going to think of you.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. He says, if you just focus on what value you can give to the audience, he says, you're not going to be nervous at all because you're thinking about them. And it was like a switch went off in my head.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I've never been nervous about getting on an interview, getting on stage, because I'm focused, what value can I deliver that's going to help somebody? And that made all the difference in the world for me.
That is beautiful. And the reason why I resonated so much with that part was because he gave me a dose of shock therapy as well, in line with that at Paradigm Shift the first time, because in 20 years, I was always nervous going on stage for some reason. I never understood why. I thought it must end eventually, but it never did. And here behind the stage, Paradigm Shift, same thing, really worked up. And he looked me straight in the eyes, and he goes, "You're nervous, aren't you, Greg Reister?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "How dare you? That's selfish." It was like the whole world just turned upside down. I was like, "How dare you? Do you have a choice?" And the same thing, that the nervousness just disappeared instantly. It was the most magical thing. He really had that effect on just, zoning in on right where you were at, communicating in a way that he knew you would get it. Flexing that communication style.
Yeah,
and that was truly beautiful. So what do you think it was that enabled him to? Was it just study over a prolonged period of time that enabled him to match a person like that, to literally help them shift their beliefs right then and there? Because that's obviously what must have happened to you and myself.
Yeah,
And
I believe it was. I mean, I look at, I was in Toronto just a few weeks ago, Anders, and visiting with family. My nephew was getting married, so we went up there for the wedding, and I remember sitting in the studio, and I was doing a webinar for somebody, and I said to Linda, my dad's wife, I said, "Hey, Linda, can I get that Born Rich book that Dad always carried?" And she said, "Sure." So she went and got it for me, and I held it, and it was like, wow, it was actually an emotional moment, because you could. If for anybody here that has seen my father holding that black book, that thing was a part of his life.
Oh yeah.
So here's the cool thing. That book was given to him by my uncle in 1963. He received his first copy of Born Rich in 61, but he started studying it so much, and my uncle, his brother, saw how much he was really taking to this book, Think and Grow Rich. And so he had a special leather-bound copy of Think and Grow Rich made and gave it to my father in 1963. Dad studied that book every single day of his life.
Yeah.
When I held that book, the meaning in it and the knowingness that he studied this book every day showed, because it had to be held together with a rubber band.
Yeah.
And when you pull the rubber band off and you open the book, it could just fall apart.
Yeah.
And that is because he literally opened it and studied it every day.
Yeah.
He became a master at what he did because he studied the material every single day.
Yeah.
And that's it. He always said there's nothing complicated about anything. If you just take a look at it from that simple point of view, he says we tend to overcomplicate things and make our life more difficult. When if we just uncomplicated it and made it simple, life would be so much easier.
Yeah.
And for him, it was simply studying something every day. If it was only 10 minutes, but when you study something every single day, you will become an expert beyond reproach. And when you're an expert in whatever field it is you're studying, it becomes easy because you know it inside and out. That was my father. He just knew the stuff. And he was able to present it in such an easy way. And because he knew it so deeply, he knew how to touch anybody he was talking to in such a snap, quick, easy way. It was really, really special.
Yeah, it was. And, on that note, you write in the book as well about his approach to teaching and, how he just kept honing it and perfecting it and never thought he got it, but always was getting it just a little bit better.
Right.
And the whole idea about the way you do one thing is the way you do everything stands out when you mention the story about the old chalk, the blackboard and the chalk and the cotton and the water cotton ratio that had me laugh, how that had to be wiped off. And then driving around with that thing on the roof of his car, like just literally doing whatever it took to live that high standard. But you write in the book something that really stuck with me, Brian. You said every aspect of his presentation was practiced, parenthesis, not rehearsed, and perfected.
Yeah.
Like, that really made me think. So, so every day he would just constantly practice and hone and tweak for perfection.
Every day. I mean, I can say that at the end of his life, he would be putting on an online event that maybe went for an hour or so. Mm-hmm. And Anders, he was not doing well. He was in a lot of pain. He wasn't feeling good. Yet he would still sit at his computer and tweak his PowerPoints and make it just right so that his presentation was perfect. Yeah. And, Dad always said a pro is at their best regardless. And that was him. I mean, even when he wasn't feeling well, he was still making sure his presentation was perfect. Yeah. And I said to him, Dad, why don't you just use a PowerPoint presentation that you've already got, that you've done before? And he looked at me like, what's the matter with you? And it was like, no, Brian, I need to make this right for right now. Yeah. And that was what he was all about. And then he would get on and he would do that presentation. You would have never known he was not feeling well. No. He did his best regardless of what was going on in his life. He gave you the very best he had. Yeah. And that is a trait that, boy, oh boy, we can all learn from. It was really special.
There's such a big lesson in that. He, even when he wasn't feeling too well, I remember he and I were having a conversation and he goes, Anders, you need to call me more often. And you're not calling me because of your self-image. You realize that. And he goes, do you realize how many millions of people you will impact negatively by not doing that? I'm like, here's a man that I know is not feeling too great, but at the same token places all of his focus on what he could give. I mean, that is just so mind-blowing. There's a big lesson in it, though, for all of us that are perfecting and honing our craft, in that, most people will sort of do it until it works, right? The real pro will do it until it can't fail anymore. Right. And that was really your father, kept striving for more and bigger and greater. And, having that feeling of, just getting laser focused on an outcome. How was it as a coworker, not just a family, not just as a son, but also as a coworker? Because you guys with Proctor Gallagher, like literally being a global leader in this and, getting to that point with the company, how was it working with him on a team like that, where he would just laser focus on an outcome regardless?
It was great. Here was the one great thing with Dad. is that when he thought up of an idea and wanted to move forward with it, we moved forward with it.
Mhm.
And everybody got online, or in line, I should say, and we all did whatever we could to get to the outcome, to make it happen. So often we see people that have an idea, something they want to do, and they plan and
Yeah.
they plan and they plan and they plan, and they never actually step out and do anything. Or
Mhm.
by the time they do, they've so overplanned it that it's not going to be valuable anymore.
Right.
Dad was always of the opinion that you come up with a good idea, you just got to step into it. You just got to start taking action,
Yeah.
and the way will show itself as you keep stepping into it.
Yeah.
And so it was amazing working with him like that, because he'd have an idea and boy, you would just do the best you could in whatever it is that your part of that project was,
Mhm.
because that's what he expected. He demanded it, of course, but
Mhm.
he expected that. And because he expected it, we all lived up to whatever he was looking for. And we would all make that happen. And it was a great way to work. There's a lot of lessons there too. There really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Tapping into the no thing, working backwards from that idea.
Right.
And I remember first time he and I met, he asked, "How do you create an illusion, Anders?" And I told him I go to something that I feel is impossible, and then I just sort of just work backwards. And he,
Right.
and he
Yeah.
goes, "That's wow, that's sort of what we've been doing. It's a sort of the similar approach to totally different fields and industries." But I remember when we wrote, we worked together on the Secret to Real Magic program, and we recorded it in Toronto.
Mhm.
I was talking to him about a challenge that I had on a personal level with my health, and I goes, "Dick, what should I do here?" And he just laughs. He goes, "Sometimes some guy told me to build an image of something they considered impossible and then work their way backwards." He hit me in the head with a newspaper.
Yeah.
That was such a good lesson. He was like, "Okay, of course, we have to take our own medicine," but he was the master at taking his own medicine and really
He really was.
internalizing it.
It's funny you say that. I got a little side conversation, but it also talks about a little something I share in the book.
Mhm.
One of the things Dad and I always did was, especially in our early morning conversations, so often people get caught up in gossip and all kinds of nonsense, and they talk bad about somebody or
Mhm.
say, "Can you believe what this person's doing?" Dad and I, we used to get in the habit of what I call talking good about people
Yeah,
behind their back.
I love that.
And you saying that brought me back to one of our conversations. I remember Dad and I talking about you, Anders.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, and this was right after you had talked about that situation, about how you create an illusion that's so crazy and then work your way back from it. And he was telling me about that, and he says, "What a great concept that is." He says, "That's exactly what we do when we're going towards something. We go for something really big, and then we work our way backwards so that we can get there." And you presented him with a different, unique spin on something he's always done, and
Yeah.
he loved that. And here was the great thing with Dad. He was never, ever afraid to learn. He
No.
didn't think he knew it all. And that's a great testament to what he was all about. And I think the way we should all be. I don't think we should ever stop learning.
Absolutely not. And when it comes to creating big shifts, big results, your dad was a master at it. You've created, I mean, some amazing results in your own life,
Mhm.
with your real estate first and then stepping into your father's business. But the big, new, beautiful home that you and Corey built up there must be one of those big, impossible things you
It
worked
is.
yourself
Yeah, it was.
backwards from.
Yeah, I remember sitting with him in Florida. I was living in Florida at the time. This is a number of years ago, and we had bought this property here, and it was kind of an old, really needed to be seriously renovated, but it's right on the ocean, and so we just loved the location. And Corey and I were thinking, boy, it'd be really nice to just really start from scratch, tear the house down, and build a beautiful custom home on the property, because we're literally 15 feet from the ocean.
Mm.
And so I can remember Dad was down visiting me in Florida. He came down for a little bit of time, and we were out for lunch, and I was talking to him about this. And he had such a great way of zeroing right in on you and making a decision and then stepping out and into it.
Mm.
And he said to me, he said, just quite simply, he says, "Brian, is that something you really want?" Because I was telling him, really, I was kind of telling him some of the reasons why we couldn't do it. It was going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get a mortgage. We wanted to pay for it, and we wanted to do it like, first class. And Dad kept he looked at me. I'll never forget. He looked at me at one point. He says, "You should start practicing what we preach." And he says, "Brian, you don't need to figure out how you're going to do it. All you need to know is, do you want to do it?
Mm.
And if you want to do it, you have to make a decision, and you're going to go for it.
Yeah.
And then the way will unfold as you keep stepping into it."
Yeah.
And it was, I can remember exactly where I was sitting in this restaurant at the table. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, "You know what, Dad, we're going to do it. That's what I want to do." And we stepped into it and we did it. And we're now living in this house. Took a couple of years to build, and it is everything we wanted. We did what Dad would have done. Anything that needed to be done, I said to the builder, I said, "If this was your home that you were building for yourself, how would you do it? And what kind of materials would you use?" And so we have this house. It's custom built, and it is magnificent. And we're living it now. We're enjoying it, and we're enjoying the reward of this because of something simple, of just making a decision and then starting to find the way there to get there. And it wasn't always easy. I won't lie, but we figured it out and we did whatever it took. The cool thing, he always said, you need to have a goal that inspires you, that you don't have a clue how you're going to achieve. If you have that kind of a goal, it's going to inspire you to do things that you would never normally do.
That's
He
it.
says, if it's goal you know how you're going to do, there's no inspiration in that.
None.
And it's like, wow, that's it. And it's in its real simple form.
It's amazing. Well, congratulations on that new home. We managed to buy our wonderful new apartment here in Miami as well, after making just a decision. And I kept telling your father last year, like, we really want to do this. He goes, "Well, what's the matter? Just go buy it."
Right.
So just and we had an agreement. I was to send him the pictures the moment we closed, and then he transitioned into non-physical. But we feel that he definitely were watching that process and seeing it unfold. We have some questions as well from the community, Brian. One of our participants, Joshua, he asks, from your perspective, Brian, what kind of legacy did Bob create for the family, and then subsequently the world? Like, how has it impacted your family as a whole?
Well, it's impacted our family. I mean, I guess I can speak for other people. I can truly speak for myself, and that's really what the book's all about. The book talks about how he impacted my life for sure. But in a simple answer to that is, he showed all of us how to live a better life, a more balanced life, and a bigger life. He always had us focused on goals, something big that we'd be going after, and really taught us that we've got to go after those big dreams, the big goals. Don't settle for the mundane. Don't just do the day-to-day, thing that most people do. Don't do what the masses do. And that was a gift. It really was. And I know he taught that in the seminars, and not everybody took it to heart, but a lot of people did. I mean, you're certainly one of the great examples of that. And that's really what he taught us. He taught us to take the lid off and go after what it is you really want in life, because we're only here this time. And why not make the best of it and live the best form of it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so good. And what I love about the book as well, and what you often bring up in it, Brian, is how your dad had that lightness about life. Like, regardless of what happened, he had that sort of light, almost childlike sense of wonder for the world and things around him, and just really being curious and open-minded. And that genuine laugh, like he would have, that you just could hear, miles away. I remember we after the recording of that program, we wanted to give him a gift, and we thought, well, what do you give a man that sort of is hooked up to infinite source of supply, like that's. And so he obviously loved his dogs, and so we gave him this dog collar. Louis Vuitton at the time had some specialized editions, and we had Miss Lee's name on the name tag. And so when it was so funny watching him opening that that gift, because you could see he probably thought it was another, whatever, wallet or something. And he was like, he saw that it was from Missy Lee, he just cracked up laughing. And it almost shook me, because I never heard him laugh that way. But like, how was it living with a father who, also like yourself, have been faced with, not so nice things, betrayal, hurt? How, what was it that enabled him to just move quickly on from it and not let it nag him?
You know what? It certainly was his awareness and his understanding. Anders, I think part of this world is we have bad stuff happen to us. It's not always good. Sometimes there's bad things that happen. And the great thing that I learned from Dad was he always said, if something bad is happening, there's got to be a good to it. He always said there's two sides to everything. There's good and bad, up and down. And he says, so if something's really bad, there's got to be something good about it. And he lived that way. Even when something bad was happening, he tried to look for the good. And that was just his natural way of being. I wrote a chapter in the book called Looking Through Rose-Colored Glasses. And it's really based on that, because, we can see the negative or we can see the positive. It's our choice. And I know that there's a lot of people that have experienced negative in their past and, hang on to that. It becomes part of their identity. One of the great things with Dad was he showed you how to let that go, how to forgive and let go. To forgive doesn't mean to forget, but it means to just let it go. You let it go for your own sake. And, he said, all we've got is right now. On the cover of the book, I put the sand timer. And I never really talked about it in the book. That sand timer to me represents my father.
Absolutely.
And he was always talking about all we've got is the sand that's going through right now. He said, the sand that's already gone through, that's our past. It's already happened. It's in our past. Let it go. What's to come, we don't know yet. We can direct it and work towards, but all we've actually got is the right now. And if we focus on right now and the good, what good can we have happen right now? What good can we, even if something bad is happening, what can we do to counter that right now and live in the present moment? Your life will be better. Our life is always worse if we're living in the future or in the past, because we're creating these circled thoughts in our head. But if we live right here and right now and do the best we can in this very moment, in no time at all, we'll have a great life. He had a great saying, and I love this saying. It's always stuck with me. He says, you can't change the time you got out of bed this morning. It is what it is. Whatever time you got out of bed, that's when you got out of bed. You can't change that. So what's happened in your past has happened. Let it go and just focus on the right now. And there's a powerful lesson in that.
Absolutely. And those videos that your dad used to do with that hourglass really, just stuck with me as well. And I remember him illustrating it way back to Born Rich, the video series from the 80s, right. and later on YouTube. And it's just such a magnificent, powerful lesson. There's, Brian, when reading through the book, you really get to know you as well. I mean, the reader gets to know you and what how it was like, working with Bob, but also you as a person. I love the chapter on where you write about your experience with, connecting with that seal and, how but there's that kinship with life, right? And you've obviously worked with this material so many years that resonance, if I can call it that, must be so high for you. It's a beautiful story. Would you mind sharing it with?
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of funny. It was, this was back maybe about 25 years ago, I guess, or close to it. I was living just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia at the time. And I was at a house right on the beach. And I was just renting it. I was there for about a year and I was just wanting to kind of get to know the area. And the fellow that I rented the house from, he gave me some traps to go and catch prawns and a canoe that I could paddle out and get it. And every day I'd go out and I'd start setting these traps up. And at first I wasn't catching anything, but I started studying what I had to do. And one of the neighbors, I remember saying, "There's no prawns left here anymore." And I just thought, you know what? Okay, I can listen to that, or I can just go out and just keep working towards it. And all of a sudden I started catching prawns. Well, he couldn't believe it, but that's aside from the fact. the cool thing was when I go out there, one of the things I always learned from Dad is to always be at peace with wherever you're at.
Mm.
And there was these seals that were always coming around me. And I just love seals. I like nature in general. And we had this one particular seal that was always coming, and he'd come pretty close to me. He had a spotted little face. He was kind of gray, very light colored, just the cutest little thing. And I called him Pup, because he just looked like a little puppy, And I would talk to him gently, and he'd kind of look at me, and it was kind of cool. And that was kind of it. Anyways, one day it was getting a little stormy. I'd set the traps out, came back in. It got really stormy. I went back out to get the traps. I guess 2 days later, because I didn't want to leave them down there for too long, but it was still pretty rough, and a storm was coming back. And I pulled them up, and I emptied the traps, and I went to put them back down, but things got a little foggy, and I guess I got pushed off to where I thought I was, because I couldn't quite see shore to the same extent. So my perception of where I was a little different. And I let the traps out. Well, the line kept going down. I guess I was in deeper water than I thought it was. And it took the whole buoy and everything right underwater. And nothing I could do. It was getting really rough. I'm just in a canoe. I didn't want to flip. So I paddled back in. I thought I've probably lost these traps.
Yeah.
Well, it was a few days later, the sun came out, and I went out, started to look for these traps. I just rigged a long pole with a hook. I thought, if I can find the buoy down there, I can pull it up. And I was out there paddling around for a good hour, maybe 2 hours. And this one little seal pup, he was around me. And it was kind of fun. I'm talking to him, and I'm just paddling around looking. I couldn't find it. So I gave up, came back into shore. And, Dad always said, follow your intuition, follow with what's guiding you. And here was this crazy seal. He was way out. Once I got to shore, I was starting to pull the canoe up. He was way out on the water, and he's barking, and he's swimming in circles. It was just really crazy. I mean, he'd done other things for me before. We would do flips and do funny little things, but like, he was swimming in these power circles, and he'd never done that before.
Wow.
And I just remember standing there looking out and thinking, God, I wonder, could that be and I thought, I just got to follow my intuition. I got back in the canoe, and it was way out. And I thought, there's no way these traps are out here. Anyways, I went all the way out to where he was, and bang, there were the trap. There was the buoy about 6 feet under the water, and the seal had been swimming around. It was like he was letting me know where it was.
Yeah.
It was a pretty cool story.
Wow.
It was an experience that I'll never forget. And I remember one of the neighbors there. I'm from the East Coast of Canada, Toronto, and the West Coast people aren't as big on the East Coast people. So I was always that little bit of an outsider. And this one fella that lived on the beach, it was like, that was the moment that I changed his perception of me. And he started calling the seal as Brian Seal, and his whole outlook on me changed because of my interaction in nature there. And it was pretty cool. And I think my interaction was because of what I learned growing up, with my father. He always said, take in your surroundings and be at peace with your surroundings.
Right.
So he always said, even animals, even aggressive animals or whatever, you can counteract whatever's going on if they feel a genuine peace from you, that you're not a threat. And that's kind of how I've lived with nature as well. And it makes a difference. I don't know, as crazy as that may sound,
No, it's such a beautiful story. And it actually, as you're talking, it takes me back to, when your dad, you guys had just finished a consultant training in Toronto, and I had just been visiting him. And it's just so happened he had to go to Vegas and that's another thing too, right? To help Jane Wilhite with her seminar while he was in the middle of his own.
Uh-huh.
But flew with your wife Corey and some consultants, and we were waiting there in the lounge area for the plane, and there was a little fly landing on my like, we were standing there talking, your dad and I, and a little fly landed on my wrist, and he goes, "Don't kill it," and he just sort of just gently brushed it off. I'm like, wow. There's that like kinship with all of life that he must have had, that you obviously have in you too. It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Wow. You talk about in the book as well, around influence, the circle of influence and people around you in the chapter on mindset about social circles.
Yep.
And you write, this is an excellent example of why we need to choose wisely who will be in our inner circle. We need to have people that not only support our dream, but people who will enhance it by encouraging and challenging us. We also need to be that person for others. Outgrowing the people around us is natural when on a path of personal development. You don't need to cut them out of your life altogether. You just don't visit as often, and you don't spend as long.
Right.
That's not easy for a person, I think, when they get into this material and start growing. What has your experience been with that, Brian? And you
Yeah,
must have seen that happen a lot.
it's never easy when you start growing at a rapid clip and you leave some people behind because they don't want to grow with you. And sometimes when you're doing big things, you will upset people close to you because you're changing. And because you're changing, you're causing them to have to change. They have to change their perception of you. And people don't like to be changed. They like to be who they are, or if they change, they want it on their own accord. And that's just a natural part of life if you're striving for big things. So Dad always said it was really important that you surround yourself with people that will encourage and uplift you. And try to surround yourself with people that are doing more than you're doing, because that will draw you up there as well. And for you also to be the person that would encourage and pull somebody up. He said, just living like that, you're going to live a better life. You're going to accomplish a lot more, and you will create really good friendships that are deep and meaningful. And that's really it. He always felt that who you surround yourself with is who you are and who you'll become. So make sure you pick good people. Sometimes we've got friends from school from way back when we were young, or family members, even, quite frankly. We've all got, those family members that you'll always have in your life. And as I said, you'll get to a point where you just don't spend as much time with them. And that's okay. You're not dismissing anybody because you're coming from a kind and good place, but you're mixing and surrounding yourself with people that are making it happen, people that are looking to grow. And when you surround yourself with people like that, your whole world's going to be different. And Dad lived that way. That was always the way he lived. So it was easy for me to learn because that's just all I ever saw.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Brian, when folks are listening to this and they read your magnificent book, there's probably going to be somebody in between who are going to be thinking, will this work for me, or has some doubt. And, one of the stories that you have in there is when you manifested your Austin Healey 3000, which is just so, you just can't make it up. I mean, it's just so on point, so specific. Can you, would you mind sharing just that story real quick? I know time is flying fast and wonderful company, and I want to be respectful of your time here. You have a lot of interviews to do, but for the folks who are doubting this, I think that story will really underscore how powerful this is and how accurate it is.
Well, first off, let me address the situation of, will these stories or messages, can they help change your life? They definitely can. I've written the book in a way that you can open it up anywhere and start reading. And you'll get a good story. And then you have consider points that will actually show you how, or cause you to contemplate really how you can make that change in your life. So there's actionable steps. I think that's really important. The Austin Healey story is kind of a fun story. I've always been big on vision boards. For those of you that don't know what a vision board is, I think most people do, but I always created a vision board where I put all kinds of different pictures of things I wanted in my life. And that was cars, boats, relationship, a house mortgage free. I mean, I would just create a collage of images that I really, really wanted in my life. So it wasn't any one specific goal, but it was a series of dreams, really, of what I wanted. And I framed it in a nice frame. I didn't just do it on a Bristol board and stuck it on a wall. I framed it really nicely and put it in the bedroom. Well, one of the things on that vision board was an Austin Healey. I'd never been in one. I never drove one. I saw them at some car shows. And for whatever reason, I was just really attracted to the Austin Healey. I just thought it was a cool looking car. It sounded great. And I thought how fun that would be just to have a little car like that to bomb around in on a nice sunny day. So it had been on my vision board for a few years. Well, I can't remember what year it was. It would have been probably 2016, I think. Dad was being honored at Carnegie Hall in New York City. And I thought, man, I got to go to New York City and watch Dad get honored at Carnegie Hall. And there was a website that I had followed, Cooper Classic Cars. And they're right in New York City, down in Greenwich Village. And they always had like concourse quality cars, you know, Porsches, Ferraris, the Austin Healey's, I mean, Mercedes, just beautiful, beautiful cars. And I thought, well, I'm going to go in a day or two early and just kind of wander around. I like New York. I just like the vibe of the city, the big city. I couldn't live there. It's a little too much, but I love going there for a period of time and just soaking it up. I thought I'm going to go down to this Cooper Classic Cars and see what they got. Just take a look. Well, I went down there and it was closed, and I discovered it was open only for appointments only. Anyways, there was a little buzzer thing, so I rang it, and somebody was there, and they said to me, "Well, we're not open to the public. It's just by appointment only." And I just said, "Well, I've been following your site for quite a while. I really wanted to just take a look at what you've got." And he says, "Well, okay." He says, "I'll come down and let you in. I've got a few moments." And he let me in. Well, I walked in. They turned on the lights, and kaboom! There was this Austin Healey that was like brand spanking new, 1962. And it was exactly what was on my vision board, like exactly. And I was like, wow. And so he let me sit in it, and I got the feel for it. I'm like, oh boy, this is beautiful. So I started talking to him. He told me what the price was, and it was a fairly heavy price. And I was like, oh, I tried to play it cool, but it was certainly more than I wanted to spend. I had other things I wanted to do. I was still renovating a house in Florida at that time. And I thought, God, I'm not sure if I want to spend this kind of money on something like this at the moment. So I said, let me get back to you. And I left. I was turning 55 at the time. And for me, 55 it's been my favorite number forever. So it had meaning to me. I wanted to do something special for my 55th birthday. And I'm walking back to the hotel, and I had taken a bunch of pictures. Well, I did the one thing that I think you do if you want to move ahead and do something. I sent pictures to my dad, and I called him, and I said, "Dad, look at this car." I said, "Oh my God, it's beautiful." And he says, "Well, why don't you go back and buy it?" I said, well, it's really a little more than I want to spend. I don't think I want to do this right now. And he just kept going, okay, all right. And then I said the one thing that pushed it over the edge. I said, I wasn't sure what I was going to do for my 55th birthday that would make it memorable, because that's always been my number. And I said, I should maybe buy this car as a birthday present to myself for my 55th birthday. Well, that was it. That's all he needed to hear. And, he said, Brian, there's what are you waiting for? Like, just go back and do it. He says, everything else will fall in line when it's supposed to, and you'll be able to do whatever you've got to do. And again, it came back to just make a decision.
Yeah.
So I went back and I made a decision, and I bought the car, and I'm up in the office. We worked out for having the car shipped down to Florida, and it was all said and done. I walked out. I was feeling good, but I was also feeling a little bit like, oh man, should I have done this right now? But I felt good. And as I'm walking back, all of a sudden I thought, oh, I'd like to see that British Heritage certificate on the car. They had this because the car is like concourse quality. It's as good as the day it rolled off the factory floor. And so I called them up and I said, hey, I know you're sending all the paperwork when you ship the car, but can you email this to me just so I can look at it? He said, sure. So I get back to the hotel room, and this is the power of law of attraction, whatever you want to call it. I get back there and I opened up the email I saw from him, and I looked at the certificate, and it was like the hairs on my arms stood up. I couldn't believe it. So it's a 1962. I was born December 8th of 1961. This particular car, the exact car I bought, started to be built on December 8th, 1961, the day of my birth. And I was buying this as a birthday present for myself. I mean, if wow. How do you like you say, you can't make that stuff up. And so, it's just, you got to have dreams. You got to go after things.
Yeah.
And if your heart is open and you're open to the possible,
Mm.
you just never know what's going to happen.
That's so amazing. Such an incredible story. And I was inspired when you shared it once at the events in LA, and something similar happened to me with a car that I'm not going to go into now because we have limited time. But you know, when you get to that point where you just know it's that specific, yeah, it's so divine.
Yeah.
Brian, could you share a thing or two here as we're wrapping up, maybe about your father that you don't think a lot of people would know? Something quirky, something different that you just don't think most people would know.
You know what? He was truly a family man, but I think most people would know that. He,
Yeah.
as much as you'd think he loved to travel and stuff, he
Yeah.
just really wanted to be at home. His favorite place was sitting in the backyard. At his house. He loved nothing more than sitting at his backyard at home. And I can remember just sitting back there with him. He'd always look around. He said, "Hey, Brian, look at this. Isn't this beautiful? Aren't we grateful for all that we have?" He was always grateful for everything he had. You know, Dad he was a great father. And I think, you know, as you read the book, you'll understand that. He was he just always showed love. And you know, you see that person up on stages, you know, barking and talking and teaching. At home, he was just a loving man. I never had a doubt how much my father loved me. And that was kind of it was a really nice thing. And you know, our last few days together, there's things that he shared with me that you know, I can't even speak about. Just the gift of sharing that love and making sure you knew deeply how he felt. That was a gift that he had. And that was the real Bob Proctor. He was a loving family man that deeply cared for his family, would do anything for them.
That's so beautiful. Brian, thank you so much for sharing all these wonderful stories and sharing your time with us here today. We have put the link for the book in the description here. And when you go and purchase your copy now, there's, I believe, $347 bonus package that comes with it.
Yeah, I've got lots of bonuses, Anders. Well, not lots, but I've got a few bonuses. Certainly a live Q&A that I'm going to do for people. You'll even get the first few chapters immediately digitally until you get your book in a couple of days. I just, like you know, I said when we first got on, this book isn't about me. It's really about my father. And I know this book can change your life because it's not a little book. It's 362 pages. And this has lessons that I have learned my entire life from my father that I applied, lessons he taught me as a son. And these are some of these things that you've never heard of in the seminars. So I just know that it will give you a really unique perspective on, you know, how to live a better life. So I appreciate you having me on and you know, basically promoting the book. I have big goals for this book. I know that if you go out and get it, you are going to really enjoy the story. You might not like all the stories, but you're going to love a lot of them. And some of these stories you will be able to apply right away for immediate change, which is great. And, you know, my hope is that you'll want to get extra copies for friends and family, because I really feel that this can touch you. This is showing a side of my father, Bob Proctor, that most people just don't know, that I think you'll get some serious benefit from.
It really does. And it's an amazing book. I'm going to read it and reread it so many times because of all the gold nuggets that's in there, the applicable tools. And I love that you recommend people to get a handful of copies because, like your father taught us all, the biggest gift is the gift of personal growth, right? So passing on that material to anybody that we come in contact with is the biggest gift we could ever give.
It really is. You know, I had such a nice, I've been getting incredible feedback from people who have already got the book, Anders, and you're one of them. And it's so heartwarming. I actually had a fellow send me a message yesterday. He knew, you know, I guess reading the book, he knew my favorite number was 55. He went and bought 55 copies of the book to give out to friends, relatives, and clients. And I thought, wow, isn't that nice? You know, it's just, that was wonderful. That was kind of a neat thing.
I love that. That's so good. We should
Yeah.
challenge all our community members here to do the exact same thing. That would be great. That would be a massive impact for sure in the world. And lastly, Brian, what impact are you hoping to see with this book? And what do you think your dad would say if you were here in physical form?
I just know my dad is really happy and proud of it, because it's showing him in a different light. That the real purpose of me putting this book out now, and quite frankly, Anders, what's causing me to step out and do whatever is necessary to promote the book, is that I really want his legacy to continue to live on. I really
Mhm.
do. I just think it's important. I think my father was unique. He had a way of teaching that was unique. And he made a big difference for a lot of people in this world, myself, yourself, and so many other people. So the real purpose of this, and really what I'm looking for, is that this carries on his legacy in a fresh and unique way, that they get to know really deeply who Bob Proctor was, because most people don't know who he was. They like his teachings,
Yeah.
but this book lets you not only get his teachings, but also have a better understanding of who Bob Proctor was as a family man, as a father.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really it.
So beautiful. Wow. Brian, I am very, very grateful for you and your
Well,
father, and for you taking your time to join me here today for our chat about your new book, My Father Knew the Secret, Growing Up with Bob Proctor. And for those of you watching, make sure you go to the link, secure yourself 55 copies each, and honor Bob's incredible legacy that we're all taking part in and enjoying today, and continue to enjoy. So, Brian, thank you so much. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Bye for now.